everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I am Thomas. This is episode 3 of Real Distracted. Now, this is going to be this episode's going to be about Fight Club, one of my favorite movies, and one of those films that had a huge impact on me. And I'm trying to think about how am I going to open the show? What am I going to write for a monologue? Am I just going to wing it like I normally do? I feel comfortable winging it because this podcast is about a guy who is an aspiring filmmaker who loves movies, who has ADHD. So I did all these notes, I did all this research, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to wing it. Except how I wanted to open the show was I wanted to read the first, where I compiled into the first page of final screen time. So I'm going to read to you. This will help get the show started. So again, welcome, Real Distracted episode number 3. Let's get it going. People always ask me if I know Tyler Durden. 3 minutes. This is it. Ground zero. Do you have a speech for the occasion? With a gun barrel between your teeth, you speak only in vowels. I can't think of anything. For a second, I forgot about Tyler's controlled demolition thing, and I wonder how clean that gun is. It's getting exciting now. That old thing, how you always hurt the one you love, well, it works both ways. We have front row seats for the theater of mass destruction. The demolitions committee of Project Mayhem wrapped the foundations of buildings with explosives. In 2 minutes, primary charges will blow base charges, and a few blocks will be reduced to smoldering rubble. I know this because Tyler knows this. 2.5. Think of everything we've accomplished. Suddenly, I realized all of this gun, bombs, the revolution has something to do with a girl named Marla Singer. Bob had bitch tits. This was a support group for men with testicular cancer. The big moosey slobbered all over me. That was Bob. Yes, we're still men. Men is what we are. Bob had his testicles removed, then hormone therapy. He developed bitch tits because his testosterone was too high, and his body upped the estrogen. That was where I fit. They'll have to drain my pecs again. Between those huge sweating tits, they hung enormous, the way you'd think of gods as big. Oh, you cry now. No, wait. Back up. Let me start earlier. For 6 months, I couldn't sleep. With insomnia, nothing is real. Everything's far away. Everything's a copy of a copy. When deep space exploration ramps up, it'll be corporations that name everything. The IBM Stellar Sphere, the Microsoft Galaxy, the planet Starbucks. I need you to get out of town this week to cover some red flags. It must have been Tuesday. He had on his cornflower blue tie. You want me to deprioritize my reports until you advise of a status upgrade? Prioritize these. Here's your flight coupons. Call me if there's any snags. He was full of pep. Must have had his grande latte enema. Like many others, I had become a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct. Yes, I'd like to order the Erica Picari dust ruffles. Please hold. Anything clever. Like a coffee table in the shape of a yin-yang. I had to have it. The Clips personal office unit, the Hovertree home exercise bike, or the Amishab sofa with the Shrine green stripe pattern, even the Resemplo wire lamps of environmentally friendly unbleached paper. I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines a person? I had it all, even the glass dishes with tiny bubbles and imperfections, proof that they were crafted by the honest, hard-working, indigenous people of wherever. We used to read pornography. Now it was the Horchow collection. No, you can't die of insomnia. What about narcolepsy? I nod off. I wake up in strange places. I have no idea how I got there. You need to lighten up. Can you please give me something? Red and blue Tuinals, lipstick, red Sacanols. No, you need healthy, natural sleep. Chew some valerian root and get some exercise. Hey, come on, I'm in pain. You want to see pain? Swing by First Methodist Tuesday nights. See the guys with testicular cancer. That's pain. So I know that was a little long-winded. I want to start there. So I could condense that into one page. So that's one page of on-screen script, and that's the opening of the film, and that packed in so much. So Fight Club, now we're going to backtrack a little bit. So Fight Club was a book that was written by Chuck Palahniuk, who he started this book. He created the book. The idea, from what a lot of people have heard and what I've researched, is Chuck Palahniuk created the book after he went camping. I don't know if he was with his family or by himself. I think it was with his family. He went camping up in the mountains or in the woods, and there was a group of hardcore drunk partiers close to them, and they just blasted the music all night long. So Chuck went out, left his tent, middle of the night, went over to the guys. I don't know how that interaction went, what he said, or how aggressive he was, but he asked them to turn the music down, and he ended up getting the shit kicked out of him. Bruised, black eye, swollen, fat lip, the whole 9 yards. If you've had your ass kicked, you know that feeling and that look. And he went back to work on Monday. Nobody at his office asked him, hey man, what happened to you? Because people just didn't want to know. They didn't want to know. And Chuck Palahniuk found that interesting. He said, that's very interesting. And a combination of what I heard was he was in college. Oh, actually, I'll fast forward. Before I fast forward, I'll move along with the plot. So this is going to be a big spoiler alert, but the movie's like 20 years old. So came out in 99. So over 20. So we're talking 25. So as this, the amazing opening of this film was incredible. The way, I'll go back to the first time I saw Fight Club. The first time I saw Fight Club, it was another one of those times. It was late night for me, 2, 3 in the morning. I didn't see it in the theater. I wish I could say that I saw that in the theater. I had no idea what Fight Club was. There was no buzz about it for me. I hadn't heard. This was in 1999 for me. I was 19 years old, and I was a wild one, to say the least. I was living down in South Florida with my family because I had a drinking problem. So much of this film related to me. Probably a lot of other people did. There was so much that related to me. Remember, I'd worked at the airport. I'd worked a bunch of jobs. I was actually a waiter at the time. I worked in nights as a waiter. And I saw this movie coming home after a night shift of waiting tables and doing room service at this resort that I worked at. And I'd wear my little stupid bow tie looking like a penguin, just like these guys did in the film. So I come home, and I'm 19. I'm not supposed to be drinking, but I already had a drinking problem. I already had a being wild and just crazy and reckless type of problem. But anyway, that's another story. So I see the movie, I really relate. But the opening, let's just talk about the opening now. So the opening is this scene that I heard cost $800,000 just to do this opening scene, when on paper the line was gun cocks and then the narrator speaks. In the original script, it was Jack, actually. As we know it now in the film, it's narrator, but it was Jack, actually. So on the original script that I read, it said gun cocks and then Jack speaks with mumbles because he has a gun in his mouth. Well, David Fincher, the director, being an amazing, brilliant director, took this literature and had, I think the gentleman's name was Charlie Ohm, who was the screenwriter, and what he adapted. It's one of the only times where the writer said that the director did a better job with this material more so than I did. He explored the fatherlessness and the lack of, there was just a little blip in the story, in the book, and the filmmaker made that into a reoccurring thing. Having no father, wanting to find someone to look up to. Edward Norton's character, the narrator, which he found in Tyler Durden. And so just keep along with the ride. This is the fun part. We're going to go back and forth. It's going to be fun. The opening is this extreme zoom out. If you remember, if you've seen the movie, which I'm sure you have, the extreme zoom out of looking from the inside of the neuro pathways, the neurons, electrons, and the synapses firing. That's how far the zoom in. And it's just this beautiful, brilliant. You don't know if you're in space. You don't know if you're just looking at cool graphics with this amazing music done by the Dust Brothers, and they did the score, and it was perfect. And then as we come to this major zoom out point, and that's when you see the gun barrel in the face of Edward Norton and the extreme zoom out. And what I read, that was the opening lines, and what they packed in to that first 2 minutes of screen time was incredible. You introduce the first two characters, the narrator and Tyler Durden. You find out that you are definitely in the present time. The narrator is introducing a character named Bob, who he met at these 12 steps. Then you find out why he went to these 12-step meetings. And then you find out, because what I read was he went to the emergency room he was drug seeking. He wanted to find something to sleep. And then you were also given 2 Easter eggs, or 2 little hidden information, where he said, I hadn't slept in 6 months. He's narrating that. Keep that in mind. He says it. I haven't slept in 6 months. Then he sees the emergency room doctor, and he says, I'm in pain. I wake up in strange places. I have no idea where I am. So keep that in mind when you watch the rest of the film, because that is alerting you to this guy hadn't slept and he's waking up in strange places. And that's kind of how it moves along. So the doctor suggests, and if anybody, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and when you want to get sober or you want to make a change, you're willing to do anything. That's how you feel. When I got sober, it was, I would do anything to make this pain go away. So now I relate, as I rewatch this film after all these years, you relate to wanting to do anything to make the pain go away or to feel better. And that was the case of the narrator. He goes to the emergency room. He's seeking medication to get a quick fix. The doctor says, you need sleep. He says, I'm in pain. He says, swing down to First Methodist Tuesday night. You want to see pain? See these guys with testicular cancer. And that's what he did. Now pause in the story and we'll talk about the book and the origin. So Chuck Palahniuk, the writer, when he was in college, he needed to get extra credits or something for a class. And he I don't know if he was brought up in the church, but he was like church adjacent, or the college that he went to was some kind of, they helped out people in the community with church. But there was this lady that would go to these meetings, just like in the film, and he would take her there. He would escort her, he would sit with her, and then he would take her home, and he would get credits for this. And he's originally, his training and his education is under journalism. So he has a journalist mind where he's just sitting back and just observing. And he said that when he went to these meetings with this older woman that was dying, people just assumed that he was sick as well. And they treated him like they loved him. And he found it very strange that, think about that, the combination of, you get the shit kicked out of you. You go to work, no one gives a fuck. No one even asks you what's going on. And then flip the other side of the coin, and you're a random stranger. No one knows who you are, and you're just sitting in a group, and they assume that you're sick, and people come to you and hug you and love on you. And they want to know what they can do for you, and they want to be there for you. So those are two, I think, big pieces and chunks of why he wrote Fight Club. And then another thing is the father. I'll get into that in a little bit. That's a really midstream. I'll get into that, and I'll tell a personal story. The fatherless, or the father figure that you find later on in life. Chuck Palahniuk says that you reject he says if you're in an interview, he said, if you're lucky enough to have a biological father around, eventually you'll reject that father and you will find another father figure. And a lot of guys can relate that. You're going to find a coach. You're going to find, if it's martial arts, if it's a job, if it's an apprenticeship, if it's in the military, you're going to look up to some higher ranking person, or guy that you work with, or just someone, even an uncle. I have some father figures, an uncle. I grew up without a dad, but that's another story. So moving along. So we come to this point where he's willing to do anything to make the pain go away. He takes a doctor's advice. He finds himself at the testicular, and then he finds out this is the first time he can cry. And then there's this angelic ethereal music playing when he cries for the first time. The proctor, or whatever you would call it, of the meeting, the chairperson of this 12-step or this help meeting for testicular cancer, he says, everybody pair off and let's cry, or let's prepare to cry. And he's like, oh God. And here comes Bob, which is played by Meatloaf. And Meatloaf, we always knew growing up, Meatloaf was a heavyset guy. And the sad thing is Meatloaf did all this in the DVDs. The director talks about Meatloaf. Poor guy lost all this weight, spent years getting in great shape. And now we have to add 100 pounds of bird seed to make the guy with the fake breast, the love handles, the big gut. So Meatloaf on screen and while working on this film, he wore literally 100 pounds of bird seed just to have the realistic movement. So anywho, Bob goes and gets paired up with Edward Norton's character, and he's like, come on now, you cry. And he cries, and that's that angelic, that crazy music going off. And he says, I was hooked. He starts going to these 12-step meetings, and I keep calling them 12-step. I don't know what they are technically, but he goes to these help groups, I'll call it. Then he's finding out that this is working for him. He's going to sleep, or so you think he's going to sleep, but he feels relaxed. He feels like people care about him. And in the midst of this Marla Singer person pops up, which is played by Helena Bonham Carter. And she walks into the men's group as a woman and smoking a cigarette. So she's a woman and she's smoking a cigarette in front of all these cancer people. She says, this is cancer, right? She's just there, it seems like, for the free coffee. And Edward Norton's character, who's bullshitting everybody just to get affection, they're there for their own reasons. And he instantly looks over and he sees this Marla Singer character, and he calls her a tourist. He knows that this chick is full of shit. Excuse my French. And it pisses him off. And then he narrates, because that's what he does. And he's narrating. He says, I can't sleep. Once I saw her, I can't sleep anymore. She's all I can think about. So he plans on going to see her, he's planning his moment to go talk to her. And he pulls her aside outside of the group out in the street. And he just is like, hey, let's just split these days up. So they agree to do that. Doesn't really have any interest in seeing her again. And one of them asks for their number. Or no, he says, hey, why don't we exchange numbers just in case, whatever. You don't know if there's a little bit of a love interest, but here's throughout the show, I'll tell you these fun facts. So one of the fun facts is Helena Bonham Carter told her makeup artist, who was right-handed, she said, when you apply the makeup, I want you to apply it with your left hand, because I don't want to appear like A, I even know how to do makeup correctly, and B, nor does this character even give a shit. So they did it left-handed and purposely. I thought that was interesting. So produce Marla Singer. They make a little bit of a connection. They work things out. They argue over who's going to go to the meetings and on what days, because he doesn't want to see her. He wants to feel, he says, when she's around, I can't cry. That's what he says. He said, why do you care? He says, I can't cry when you're here, and I need this. And who knows why she's going? She seems like she's going just for coffee and cigarettes. And I've been to meetings where there's been plenty of times where people were there just to go in and get in out of the cold or out of the rain, depending on what state I was in, come out of the snow and get coffee and donuts. And hey, that's all right. No one ever judges for that. But you don't know if that's why she's there or not. So those two, they part ways. But I remember watching this for the first time. Now, again, watching this for the first time, I'm amazed. You don't really know his name, and you hadn't really thought about, because the story was moving along so perfectly that you didn't think to wonder what his name was until Marla Singer brought that up. She says, what's your name anyway? What do I call you? Travis, Rupert, Cornelius? Is your name any one of the fake names because they wear badges? Little sticky, hello, my name is thing. And right as he's about to respond, a bus goes by and it cuts and moves the story forward to when Edward Norton, the narrator, meets Brad Pitt's character, Tyler Durden, on a flight. He starts going over the job that he has, and it's this job, which I looked it up. It is a real job, or was, and the biggest recorded case of this happening, this meaning, so what his character does is he investigates car crashes that were car malfunctions that caused deaths that were caused by a malfunction, and his job is to bring the data to the car manufacturer who he works for and assess if they're going to do a recall. And if it's not cost effective, but it's still killing people, they won't do the recall because it's cheaper to pay families out. And the biggest case of this was by GM. I'm not saying they're the only ones that have done this, but the biggest one was, it was called the something Perry Files. But there was about 126 people that were killed, and they just kept on going along with selling this car because they were paying off, and they finally got forced to do a recall. I'll look that up right now. It was General Motors' flawed ignition switch was one of the deadliest auto recalls in history. It killed 124 people. That's the grim tally from Kenneth Feinberg, the attorney charged with compensating victims. He also awarded payouts to another 275 people who were injured in the accidents. So that was based off of facts. Okay, so moving forward, the narrator, now he's traveling a lot. As I read in that opening line, his boss sent him on the road, and he met Tyler Durden, who was quoted as a charismatic soap salesman with radical philosophies about life and society. Together they form an underground fight club as a form of male bonding and rebellion against societal norms. And the consumerism critiques the emptiness of materialism and the modern obsession with possessions. And it also explores the search for self-identity in a society that dictates how individuals should live. It also challenges masculinity. Masculinity challenges traditional notions of masculinity, focusing on its crisis in modern society. And this is in 1999. This is definitely ahead of its time, especially if you think about them talking about Starbucks. I barely knew in 99, I barely knew what Starbucks was. I think I knew what Starbucks was from Austin Powers. I did not know what IKEA was. So the part where he says in the future it's going to be all private, there hadn't been in 1998, 1999 when this came out, there was not a private space flight. That was done by Elon Musk, Tesla, and SpaceX. It's crazy because in the film they talk about in the future it's going to be, Starbucks and Microsoft Galaxy and whatnot, etc. So anyways, the narrator follow along with me. I know this is the fun part. This is we're going on a, down, back and forth. We'll get it there. So the narrator meets Tyler Durden on the plane, and they have the same briefcase. So that's interesting. And he's dressed really cool. He's got cool glasses, really good looking dude, in shape, tanned up, freaking awesome haircut. They're digging him, flirting with one of the flight attendants. Meanwhile, the narrator is just sitting in his spot, making his little nerdy comments about being a single serving friend, a little funny joke or whatever that he made. And clearly seems like he has no friends. And he starts chatting and chopping it up with Brad Pitt. He opens up his soap. He gives him a card and makes these weird statements about what it's like if the plane crashed. He was talking about people that the plane really crashed. The reason why there's oxygen on the plane is to get people high before they die because they know that they're, and it was just very odd, and he just found this guy to be very interesting. So they both land in the same city. And by the way, another interesting thing, what Fincher does, he did the same thing with Seven. They didn't mention what city they were in, and the way that they made LA look, this film was filmed completely in Los Angeles. And Fincher made that city look like it could have been anywhere else but LA. It looked like it could have been New York, Philadelphia, looked like it could have been Seattle, Chicago, even London, where they were. And that was one of the coolest parts. And I'm somebody who always wants to know where they are. And I don't know what it is, but I always want to guess. Most time it's in LA, but if they're outside of LA, I'm always looking for a landmark or, even the plants, even the vegetation. Where is that? That's somewhere south, whatever. But in this film, and visually, the cinematographer did a good job at desaturating everything. Everything was really dark, and colors would stand out. They would pop out, but it was a very good use of it. Like the bar, there was the big neon sign. Everything was just dark, but great use of color, great use of the visual. Normally, I don't want to see a film with a whole lot of CGI in it, but this was perfect. The usage of it was perfect. It was such a movie. So anyways, they land. The narrator gets a cab back to his apartment, back to his IKEA nest egg, and Tyler jumps in this cool Camaro. I remember it was like the badass with the chrome rims, convertible. He gets in and just peels out in front of the airport. And he gets home. He finds out his apartment was blown up, caught on fire. He has nowhere to go. He's got no friends. And he got 2 phone numbers in his pocket. He got Marla, who he had met previously, and he doesn't want to contact her because he knows she's out there. And then he just got this guy Tyler's number. So he calls a payphone. Another little Easter egg. The payphone that he called from, if you zoom in, it says on the payphone, this payphone cannot receive inbound calls, only outgoing calls, something along those lines. So he calls the number, ring, ring, ring. He hangs up, and as soon as he's walking out of the phone booth, which are like relics now, you would find one. I haven't seen a payphone in forever, let alone a payphone. So the phone rings back, and it's Tyler saying, "Who's this?" And they just tells him what's going on. Next thing you know, they meet at a bar to have a couple beers and just shoot the shit. And they start having this cool discussion about consumerism and everything is falling apart. There's that famous line of Tyler. He's like, "Fuck Olestra," which Olestra was like a fat substitute. Then it ended up causing, which is funny, causing people like really bad problems. But they're like, he said, "Fuck Martha Stewart," for whatever reason. He says, "Yeah, Martha Stewart, polishing the brass of the Titanic, man. It's all going down." So they end up getting into a fight outside for fun. They end up saying, hey, they're drunk. "Hey, man, never been into a fight. Have you? I want you to hit me." And he says, that's when, wait, let me rewind a little bit. They're going out the back parking lot, and he wants the place to stay. He's trying to see if he can crash with them, but he doesn't want to ask him. So he's like, "Man, is it too hard for you to ask?" "Ask what?" He's like, "Come on, man." Because he said, "I guess I'm going to find a hotel." He's like, "Oh, come on, man. 3 pitchers of beer. You still can't ask?" "Oh, ask what?" He's like, "You need a place to stay, right? That's why you called me." He's like, would that be okay with you?" And he's like, "Would that be okay for you to ask me?" He's like, "Could I stay?" "Yeah, sure. No problem, man." And then he says, "I want you to do me one favor. I want you to hit me as hard as you can." And then it pauses, and then it background rewind. It breaks the fourth wall. He's looking into the screen. He's telling how Tyler he was like a little time mouse where he did all these jobs. He was like a waiter, did a theater, and he'd clip like graphic material with like family films, he called him forgot what he called him, but it just told the story about what kind of crazy shit this guy was into. Worked all these jobs just to fuck with people, put in people's foods at these high-end restaurants and did all this crazy shit. So then he goes to stay with Tyler on this Paper Street. So Paper Street was where the house was. That was the name of his company. And then another fun fact is if you Google Paper Street on a map, is known to be a street that's unfinished. or that it doesn't exist. There's some kind of connection there, which I found that to be interesting. Be right back with you guys. I'm going to take a little intermission. All right, so getting back to the plot, there was the scene where they're walking back to Tyler's house. He says, "Where's your car?" And there's these moments of when you rewatch Fight Club, which is like the best at the second time, because you'll go back and you'll see that, for one, you see Brad Pitt in the frame for like a half a frame. He'll pop up everywhere. And then there's the scene where they get on the bus together, and there's a guy who brushes past one of them. And then there's another scene where Tyler's walking down a hall. When he's walking down Tyler is going to help Marla, and there's no reflection of him on either side of the wall, and there should have been. Anywho, so they're coming, the guy back to the house. They're coming back from their first fight with each other. He just kind of sleep. Hey, you could crash here. And then 2 months go by, and he's like, we were like regular Ozzy and Harriet. And every night or every weekend, they would go behind the bar, and then the groups of guys showing up to fight were growing. And it says, another fun fact, Tyler Durden's influence. Brad Pitt discussed how Tyler Durden represents the ultimate freedom from societal constraints, and how he approached the character as someone who embodies the primal, uninhibited side of human nature. Brad Pitt and Norton also touched on how they work together to create a dynamic where Tyler seems more like a mentor or an alter ego rather than just a separate character. And there was that before. There was that he needed a mentor, and I think that's why this resonated with men so much, because like Chuck Palahniuk said, most guys, most prefer their father find to become a different man. You want to become a different person. You might love your dad, you might love for what he did for you, and you could still be close with him. But as far as looking up to someone, you're going to find there's going to be a transition, and that's all psychological. He was really, really intertwined book, and the basis for the book, or the inspiration for the book. By the way, Chuck Palahniuk has about his own father. The story of what happened is incredible. His father was murdered to help a woman. I'll let you. That's a whole other. If you get a chance, check out the Chuck Palahniuk has been on Joe Rogan, I think, a few times, but there was the episode where he tells the whole story, and he's such a great, brilliant, articulate storyteller. Much better than me. I'm all over the place. This guy is, his life in 7 minutes time, and he will have all these amazing, brilliant details. But so things turn when they start club, and he said it was on the tip of everyone's tongue. We just needed to call it a name. And then they formed the group Fight Club. And everybody was there because they just looking for something. They just wanted to express their anger, or they wanted to get out of the grind. You got to go punch a time clock. And there was guys from all walks of life. There was maitre d's, and there was copier guys, and then there was lawyers, and then there was, I think even the priest showed up at the end, the priest that the guy sprayed with the hose. But so the film was amazing. This was such a great movie for so many different reasons, and I think it was ahead of its time. I don't think it's political at all. I think it just has to do with we all have trouble growing up. I don't know how else to say it. We all have trouble growing up. When I saw this when I was 19, I certainly sure as fuck did. In the film, he says, I don't know what to do. I'm a 30-year-old boy. So there's the scene before Fight Club officially got started. No, I'm sorry, it did. And they're both. Norton is scrubbing his one suit that he has. He's scrubbing the blood out of it. Brad Pitt's in the bathtub, and he's got over his head, and they're just having a conversation. It's one of the best one of my favorite scenes of the film. And it starts out with just, if you could fight anybody, who would you fight? And friends do that with each other, especially, whether or you're a sports guy, whatever it is. If, every movie, or who's your Boston Celtic? But it has to be between the year of 1989 and 1993. Who's your favorite, whatever? Who do you like better? I do that, but it's funny that they're doing it with fighting. He says, who would you fight if you could fight anybody? Edward Norton said, I'd fight my boss. I said, really? Yeah. A lot of us could relate to that. And then he says, who would you fight? I said, I'd fight my dad. Really? And then this is the interesting part. Brad Pitt says, yeah, I'd fight my dad. Edward Norton says, I don't really know my dad. I've never really, he's like, he left when I was like 6. He left my family, left us alone. And then he went and moved to a town and started like 6 different women in different cities. And then Brad Pitt made a comment, fuckers setting up franchises. So moving forward in the conversation, he says, Brad Pitt says, yeah, I'd fight Dad. He says, I go to school. I was like, well, Dad, what do I do now? He says, go to college. I don't know, go to college. He says, college, finish college. I make my next call to my dad. Hey, Dad, I'm done with college. What do I do now? I don't know, get a job. About 4 years later, I get a job. I said, hey, Dad, okay, I got a job. What do I know? I don't know, get married. And then he responds with, get married. He says, Edward says, I can't get married. I'm a 30-year-old boy. And boom, so many people could relate with that. You're kind of like, you're like faking it and you make it. I don't have any kids, but I can't imagine with like being a dad, getting married for the first time, being a dad, really with anything. They say, fake make it, because you don't know what you're doing. First time parents, first time marriages, you don't know what you're doing. You're just, you might have had a clue, but there's a little scene, there's a quote in there that I always found interesting. Because when Brad Pitt says, yeah, I call, Dad says, get a job. And then Edward Norton says, yeah, I can relate to that. And what was so strange was literally 45 seconds prior, he just said he didn't have a dad. And then Brad Pitt saying, yeah, my dad did this. And he said, I can relate to that. It was so weird. And then they just move on. Before you find out the big reveal in the end, there's all these little weird of evidence that shows that something is not right here. So fast forward, I don't drag it out too long, but so fast forward, Fight Club's becoming big. It's getting successful. Now the two friends that started Fight Club, they start feeling a separation. Pitt starts sleeping with Marla. Edward Norton wants to keep Marla out of it because she ruined things. He sees her downstairs. They end up hooking up. Brad Pitt, they come downstairs in the morning. He sees her. He's eating cereal. And then she just shows up. She's brushing her teeth. And he's like, what are you doing here? Why are you at my house? And she's just like, fuck you. And you don't know because she's kind of nuts. So she just says, fuck you, and walks out. But come to find out, there was no Brad Pitt. There was only him. Spoiler alert, it was only him the whole time. So when you go back and you see this stuff and he's mad at her for being in his house, she's like, what are you doing here? And it's like a few hours ago, they were just sleeping with each other. And he just woke up and he got out of he just has this severe mental problem. He had schizophrenia, whatever you want to call it. So they're slowly, this army, Tyler is slowly building an army to start Project Mayhem, which is he wants to set the world back to the Stone Age. He wants to remove all the debt. He wants to cause mayhem. It's called Project Mayhem. He's got this group of loyal followers. Norton doesn't know where his place is. He's feeling disconnected. He's trying to fit in. He wants to be part of it. And then it just seems like they're moving along without him. And there's just so many great scenes. I don't want to keep going on about the movie. I'm probably missing a lot, but I'm going to do a lot more of these. I'm working on my my podcast. I really enjoy it. If there's anybody out there that enjoys it as well, I appreciate it. Keep sticking with me, and we're gonna get better and better. So to some notes. Narrator's evolution. Edward Norton talked about how he viewed the character as someone undergoing a psychological breakdown and how the narration was crucial to conveying the character's inner turmoil. Fincher and Norton discussed how the unreliable narration was intentionally used to reflect the character's fractured psyche, which that's very interesting. For the role, both actors discussed the physical demands on the roles, particularly in the fight scenes. They shared stories about the choreographed fights and how they rehearsed them and the injuries they sustained during the filming. This is really crazy. Brad Pitt broke a piece of his front tooth during one scene, which he had filed down for the role. Which I heard Brad Pitt had a tooth. I've read like 3 different about this, but this is dedication either way. I heard that because if you notice that halfway through the film, Brad Pitt has a chipped tooth, he shaves his head, but that might be because he's gotten more and more serious about the Fight Club, or his character is just changing. And another thing is Edward Norton lost weight and got skinnier, and he avoided the sun, while Brad Pitt went to the tanning booth, gained weight, ate more, worked out more, and got bigger and, more healthy looking, while Edward Norton was looking more sickly, which that's pretty cool for those two guys to both do that. Excuse me. So they both kind of separate, as like emotionally, they're both kind of, they were like brothers, or like, they built this thing together. They've got this troop of men. They've got this army behind them that's loyal. They're also, these are, societies or just guys that really don't have much going on for them. Now they found a purpose in this Project Mayhem and this Fight Club. But there's a scene where they get in a car with 2 of the guys from Project Mayhem, and they're both in the front seat, and Brad Pitt just lets the car go off the road, and he says, "Just let go." And they get into this major car accident, and then it seems like they kind of split from there. And now the good part of him, Edward Norton, is trying to protect. They're like kidnapping Marla, even though he doesn't really care for her that much. He wants to protect the narrator, and Edward Norton wants to protect Marla from these guys that are going to use her as leverage. And it's just, things have gone completely off the reservation. These guys, he finds evidence that these guys are planning attacks on buildings, and he wants to go to the police. He has all this evidence. He shows them, hey, this is what's going to happen. I've got dates. I've got addresses. I've got proof that there's plan for bombings. And it's one of the cops walk out, and the other cop says, "Don't worry, we're taking care of it." And he doesn't know how far this really goes. Now he finds out that the cops are in on it. The cops are part of this Project Mayhem. He starts trying to research. This is what happens. This is when you find out the major scene, when you find out that Brad Pitt and Tyler Durden and the narrator are one person. He's in a hotel, and Brad Pitt just kind of shows us like, you created me. And what he says, he's like, I'm not some loser that had to create some alter ego. And it caused him like this severe, like looking at it from a realistic point of view, it caused him like this severe mental down where he just passed out. And then that's when Tyler took over, and he wakes up. He doesn't know how to follow what he's done because it's really him. Now he knows that Tyler's not a real person. It's him doing all this. So the whole time when he says, I haven't slept in a year, I haven't slept in 6 months, I wake up in strange places. So come to find out, every time he thought he was asleep, he was off doing this crazy shit, becoming or being this different person. He's trying to be the good person and try to stop this. So he goes downstairs at the hotel, and he gets the call log, and then he starts going. He's got all these flight coupons. So he starts flying all over to meet with these people to find out what's happening. He starts going to where he'll call the number. It says, yep, it's in Seattle. He starts going all over, Portland, wherever. And he finds that everybody that he's meeting is like, yep, we're ready, sir. Project Mayhem's ready. So now he finds out it's this national Project Mayhem of exploding these credit card buildings is what they're going after. So ultimately, this right with the book. The book and the film are pretty much spot on up until the end, and I'll get into that before I wrap it up. The round, he's so they're going around, or he's going around from city to city. He comes back, he's trying to protect Marla, and then, like I said, it splits with the ending where in the film, so changes from the book. Fincher and Yules, who's a screenwriter, discussed the decision after the ending from the book, particularly the final scene. The narrator and Marla watch buildings explode. They wanted to give the film a more visually impactful and cinematic conclusion while still leaving some ambiguity about the narrator's fate. Impact of the Pixies song. The use of the Pixies song, Where Is My Mind, which is the first time I had ever heard that song that I remember, at the film's climax was a last-minute decision. Fincher explained how the song perfectly captured the film's tone and became an iconic part of the movie's legacy. Brilliant ending, just beautiful. So, all right. So Tyler and the narrator finally have to fight each other. And in order to, Tyler is whooping his ass. He finds out that there's a van. Then it goes back to the opening scene where he says, not now. So he has them upstairs in this high rise, and they're going to overlook. They're there just to get a view of all the buildings that they're going to blow up. And he's trying to stop it. So he ends up thinking, hey, you're not real. If I can use my mind control and I could get to be more work properly a few moments, I can remember that you don't have a gun in your hand. I'm the one who has a gun in my hand. And he does. And then he goes, oh, that's a funny trick. So the from Brad Pitt's hand to Edward Norton's hand. And he goes, hey, that's not going to stop anything. The bombs are still already rigged to blow. So he's like, I'm on to you. And then you have no idea, watching this the first time, you have no idea that he's about to stick a gun in his mouth. And the slow-mo of the gun discharging in his mouth and just blowing the side of his cheek off, it actually kills Tyler Durden. It kills off that character. He's alive, he's bleeding, and that's on par with the book, except the ending of the book is he blows up all the buildings and he ends up in a trial. He gets sentenced because of the video footage. So the film, Marla going upstairs, he tells Project Mayhem guys, hey, don't worry, I got this. He's like, you need medical attention, sir. You really need medical attention. He's bleeding all out of his face. And they hold hands, the famous scene. They hold hands. They look into the destruction, and the buildings are just kind of falling like fireworks, just kind of like scene. They're holding hands, the pixie, and then, and roll credits. But in the book, it goes a little further than that. He goes to court. He gets all these charges. And because of all of the surveillance cameras inside of that building, there was footage of this man fighting himself, where people try to say that they're insane and that's their defense. He had all this evidence to show that this guy he was beating himself up. He shot himself, all this crazy shit. So he gets sent to a mental institution until 2012. And when he gets to the mental institution, he finds out that all the orderlies there are in Project Mayhem. And that's the end of the story. It's just he's like, okay, finally, I'm safe. I'm away from all this stuff. I can't do anybody any more harm. And then they say, don't worry, sir. We'll get you out of here. And it's like, oh my God, like it never, like this, the mayhem. And then I don't remember what year it was, but Chuck Palahniuk and Dark Horse Comics came out with Fight Club 2, which is interesting. Years later, it came out, I want to say in 2016 or something like that. They did 3 versions of the first issue. It's a comic book. So I guess they weren't going to do a movie. And it's Tyler, after he went to the mental hospital, he took all these meds, he got himself straightened out, and then Marla did the same. They become this happy couple, they get married, then they have a kid, and the kid is having the same problems that Tyler did, and that's what the comic book Fight Club 2 is about. But anyways, I want to say thank you guys for riding along. I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff, but hey, it is what it is. I'm pretty missed, but I'm just having a good time. I hope you guys did too. Following along, Real Distracted episode number 3. And like I say, every week what I want to do is interact with the listeners. And the response I got back last week was, because last episode was Goodfellas, episode 2 was Goodfellas, but I didn't quite get, so I want to say to, it's a family, the Funkhausers. So Chris's was Dr. Zhivago. I was talking about Goodfellas, but thank you for mailing. And so it was Dr. Zhivago. This was their 3 films. Mrs. Doubtfire, great film. And on Fire, great film. And Dr. Zhivago. And I just wanted to say thank you. Those are 3 of the listeners, the Funkhausers. Thank you so much for tuning in. So this week I'm going to say if if you could use, let me think about this. If you could remake any movie of any time period, they're always remaking movies. I want to say, email me. If you could remake any movie, even if it was a remake, like how they RoboCop, I was all excited about that, and it kind of sucked. Even if it was a reboot, if you could redo the reboot, or just remake an original, like if you could remake Dr. Zhivago or whatever, what movie would you remake? Email me that, and whoever's got the coolest story, I'm going to mention you on the next 4th episode. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I'll see you next time. This has been episode 3 of Real Distracted. Thank you very much. Take care. Cue the outro music.